Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Um, we are not actually starting yet. Apologies. This is just a teaser. I just wanted to greet everyone and introduce our speakers and apologize deeply for the late start, specifically to our speakers. We're very sorry. My name is Koro Mane Koroye. I am the host for today's edition of the Ecobank Fintech Breakfast Series. You all look fabulous, by the way. Okay, especially the girlies. The girlies are looking good. I love this outfit and I love this outfit. Thank you for showing out. Okay, we can settle down. I'll tell you a little bit about the event and then we're going to practice using our engagement tool for today. We're using a tool called Slido. If you've ever been to any TechCabal event, you'll be familiar with it by now, but we're going to go through it so that we're all set up and good to go when our speakers come up. Okay, so first let me talk about our speakers. We have a few, we're missing one, but almost everyone is here. Lexi is here, Miss Yemi Kerry is here, Chinedu is here, Miss Tosin is here, and Daniel, our moderator, is also here. Thank you guys for joining us. Can we please clap for our speakers, our panelists? Let me just say that being on any stage, small or big, is not easy. And please, it would be great to encourage them, ask questions too. This is a learning session. Okay, very important. Okay, let me talk briefly about TechCabal. TechCabal is a Pan-African media publication. I serve as TechCabal's managing editor. That's just a fancy title. I'm just a glorified manager. That's it. All I do is follow up on deadlines. That's really it. The real people that do the work are our reporters, and Daniel is one of them. He's our senior reporter. Please appreciate him. He's always chasing these big tech companies and asking them plenty of questions. Thank you for showing up, Daniel. Okay, let's pull up Slido and let's practice using Slido, okay? This will require your device, mobile, iPad, computer, whatever it is that you have with you, okay? So let's get ready. You're going to go to www.slido.com. Hello to our online audience. We appreciate you. I celebrate grace all over there. Thank you. Okay, www.slido.com. When you get into the website, you will see a blank bar that will ask you to put in a code. The code is Ecobank BFSS2. Ecobank BFSS2. Yes, Slido, SLIDO.com. This is where we're going to be sending in our questions for our panelists and our speakers today. The code is Ecobank BFSS2. Ecobank BFSS2. Yeah, so as soon as you get into the website, you will see, it can, uppercase, lowercase, doesn't matter, but you see a bar that asks you to put that in. Are we good? Are we looking good? Is everybody in? If you're not in, say, wait on me. Oh, okay, come on now, move quickly. Come on now, all right. Okay, so first, I will allow you guys to ask a question, okay? My team at the back, they're going to put in another question, but I want you guys to ask any question. You can ask a question about the host, about TechCabal, about the speakers, about anything, really. I'm willing to share my favorite color, but not my age. You can't know that, unfortunately. I might be a vampire for all you know, and I'm 100 years old. Okay, so let's see if we can get a question in. And by the way, if you see a really good question, you can upvote it. So if you absolutely want me to answer a question that you see, just there's a thumbs up sign next to the question. You can upvote it. Okay. Okay, well, my name is Koro Mane, or KK, never Koro. Please don't call me Koro. It does not mean anything in my language, okay? Koro Mane is a full thing. What is my status? What does that mean? Like, am I single or married? Wow, guys, come on. This is a professional event. Come on. I can't see this question here, but is today's event only about fintech or other tech and getting? It's primarily, for fintechs, but fintech is connected to everything now, so really it's open to everyone, but the focus is going to be on fintech startups. Okay, how tall am I? Wow, I'm 5'2", guys. I'm 5'2". Okay, we're likely to start at 9 a.m. actually. Okay, I think we have a sense of how this works. Okay, Team TC Insights, can I get the question for the audience, please? Yes, there will be there will be food. In what month did Ecobank launch the Fintech Breakfast Series? So the first edition, which there are months here. Please select which one you think the answer is. Can you guys see the question when you're in Slido? I'm concerned that nobody has responded. Oh, okay. It's not updating on this end. Wonderful. It was in April. So well done to 48%. Oh, well, 46. It's April. So we can stop selecting this too now. Okay, so we've gotten a hang of it. Yes. So any question you have for any of the panelists, whether they're up or before they come up, please use Slido to ask the question. Yeah? Okay. Do I need to run through anything else? TC Insights? No? Okay. So please give us a few minutes and we're going to get started and then we can get the show on the road. Thank you very much. I'll be back up again. Thank you. Oh, yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay. Now we're really ready to start. Okay. So I would like to invite the MD of Ecobank, Mr. Bolaji Lawal, to give the opening address. Thank you, sir. Good morning.
Okay, good morning, everyone. And thank you so much for being here. And for those online, thank you as well. So earlier on this morning, I read a post online from a guy called, I think, Cyril Shonibare. And his own view is that the African fintech sector is on the path of exponential growth. And it's quite interesting and instructive. So how can we as a country, and how can we as an industry in Nigeria take advantage of the opportunities that we see? And that's why I'm so excited about the discussions today. We'll be talking about corporate governance, we'll be talking about fundraising, and these are what you call the building blocks for success. So I'm looking forward to learning, I'm looking forward to sharing ideas with all of you, and most importantly, how we can all work together to more or less translate all the opportunities that we see into reality. And just as an aside, when we finish with all this, we're going to have refreshments downstairs, if you don't mind. But that's because we have an exhibition going called Amazing Nigeria. We have a wide range of pictures that we would like you to see. And I'm sure that a lot of you will take pictures. And some of you will scan the QR code and also watch the videos. But a few of you will think about NFTs and how to monetize the potential that we have. So let's just keep thinking and let's keep working together to see how we can solve a lot of the problems that we see and also translate challenges into opportunities for growth and profitability. So thank you so much, and I look forward to learning from all of you today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Okay, so in the first edition, we focused on helping fintechs understand how they can leverage strategic partnerships. Our first session, we're going to be talking about corporate governance. Now, corporate governance is important across tech startups, But for fintechs, they need to pay special attention to corporate governance within their startups, within their organizations. And that's because financial technology deals with money, consumer money, investor funds, so it's important to know how to properly manage what has been given to you. In this session, Daniel Adeyemi will be moderating it, and he'll be speaking to Tosin Iyayi, who is a partner at Aluko Anoyobode. So please let's welcome our first speakers for today's session. Thank you.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I'm glad to be here with Tosin Iyayi, who is a partner at Aluko and Oyobode. She's going to be speaking to us. We're both going to be talking about the important role that corporate governance plays in startups and, more specifically, fintech industry, like Koro Money, or we just call her KK, really, in the company, like she just explained. So Tosin, we'll get right to it.
Hi.
My first question really is, how should startups, how should they think about corporate governance? Corporate governance doesn't sound cool. It doesn't sound like innovation. It doesn't sound sparkly and shiny. But how should they think about this? Most especially looking at the different stages. So you have, pre-seed, seed, based on how mature the company. How should they think about corporate governance?
Okay, great. First, thanks for having me. So for startups, right, corporate governance is actually very important in every facet of the life of an organization. So whether it's in the seed stage, the Series A, Series B stage, whatever stage the company is in, it's very, very important that they think seriously about corporate governance. And obviously, it's not like Daniel said, it's not a tech buzzword. It sounds very, very daunting. But really, what it means, so for example, a company that's just starting out, what it means is that as a company, you need to start to think properly about your ethos, your policies. So let me just take it back a bit. So for, obviously, corporate governance has about 4 main pillars. So you have fairness, accountability, responsibility, transparency. So those are the main things, and it just revolves around those 4, however you choose to look at it, or whatever stage your company is in. So you need to be sure that when you're setting up your company, you have those pillars at the back of your mind, or top of your mind actually, and that regulates how the company goes. So as the company grows, you then start to put things in place, but you don't wait until your company has grown. And as the MD said earlier today, it's an area that is going to grow and grow exponentially. And we can all see it. There's a lot of disruption, a lot of companies are springing up. You don't have to wait until when the company goes to a certain state before you then start thinking of putting certain corporate governance structures in place. So as an organization, right from the inception stage, at the seed stage, the founders need to start to think seriously of what their company policies are going to be, what kind of board they're going to set up, the roles of the people that they're going to bring in. So it's not just, it shouldn't just be, yes, the founder has all the nice, fancy ideas, but the founder also has an obligation to start to think seriously about how the company wants to go, because for a company to grow, you will need a lot of investors and funding, and your corporate governance policies would actually play a role in how well your company grows and how sustainable that company is on the long run. So for example, in the seed stage of a company, you don't really have to worry about having a board, but you need to start to have conversations, you need to start to put things in place. Like I said, think about what kind of structure you want to have for corporate governance. As the company grows to the next stage, you then have maybe a board. It doesn't have to be a large board, so maybe about 5 people. The founder, maybe 1 founder or 2 founders. If it's a company that's co-founded, you have 2 founders. You may put maybe 2 of your investors on the board, and 1 other technical person. And at that stage, you don't even have to worry about remuneration for your board as well. You just want a company that is functioning, and you want a board that is steering the affairs of the company. And also it's very important at that stage to think about an independent person, so like a non-executive director, even though it's a very small component, it's not a large board, you need to start to think about things like that, because there's a tendency for the founder's ideas and even ambition to get in the way of certain things about corporate governance. Also, sorry, let me just backtrack. At that stage, at the early stage, it's very important for a company to also engage its regulators. It's very important. So for fintechs, CBN, you need to engage with your regulators. You need to find out what your regulator wants from you. You don't want to start to run a company and go off on a tangent, then a few years down the line, your regulator calls you to say, look, you've flouted XYZ. So at a very early stage of the life of your company, you need to start to think about engaging your regulator to know what exactly is required of you as an organization. And so when the company starts to grow, you start to expand. So when you grow even beyond that Series A stage, for example, you then have a larger board, at which point you then start to put people who have specific expertise on your board. You have to think seriously about that. That is what corporate governance is about. It's not just to have a board for the sake of having a board. Okay, we need to have a board. No. You need to bring people on board who are going to add value to your organization. You need to have the technical people. So for example, for your fintechs, you need to have someone who is a finance person who is going to be looking at your numbers. You need to have a compliance person, someone who is going to be ensuring that you're keeping in terms with what your regulator requires of you and with corporate governance policies. You need to have a technical person. So it's not enough to have an IT department. Your company is like a repository of a lot of people's data. So you need to be sure that you're not going to be breaching data protection regulations. You need to think of having a cybersecurity expert on your board. You need to have somebody who is a legal person as well. And you need to have all these sorts of people on your board. You need to have a risk person, someone who is the operational person, and of course the chairman of the board, who should be an independent person or a neutral person who will steer your company in the right direction, the affairs of the board in the right direction.
Thank you very much. That was very insightful. Thank you so much, Tosin. At this junction, I'd like to add that for everyone here and even those online, if you have questions, because we're going to take questions in the second half of this conversation from the audience, you can just send it to Slido, which was demonstrated earlier. So just as the questions come, just send them. So back to you, Tosin. I remember you talking, at the beginning, and you said, "Oh, you don't need much." And I'm asking this question for someone that just starting a business, because when you think about corporate governance, these things you're saying, people are thinking about, oh, I don't have much, or many times you're starting a business and there's so many things you're pulled from different places. How can, in practical ways, businesses or fintech companies that don't have a lot of resources, how can they abide, or how can they engage in appropriate corporate governance practices? Because you're thinking about, it's as simple as having, ensuring that power is not concentrated in one place, in little things as even having human resource, whether it's outsourced or not, even down to the policies. You're thinking, oh, I'm not a lawyer, do I need to get someone? As opposed to just copying things off Google, right? Which is like the de facto. So how should people or startups that think they don't have a lot of resources, how should they think about it?
Great. Okay, so for startups who are just setting out, you don't really have to expend a lot of money in order to comply or to have corporate governance structures. What you really need at that stage, like I said, is to actually have things clearly defined, know what policies are going to guide your company, your ethos, and just be sure that you're also complying with what your regulator requires of you. Those sorts of things don't really need finances. Of course, for your board, you don't necessarily your board members could be unpaid, or maybe you just pay stipends as and when you're able to. At the beginning stage of your company, some of your investors, like I said, could even just sit on the board with the future goal in mind without necessarily expecting to draw from the organization at that point. So you really don't have to spend a lot of money. The most important thing is to have structures, and not just having structures for the sake of having structures, but to actually be doing what you have said you're going to be doing in those structures, so that your regulator doesn't come after you.
Yeah, thank you very much. What I heard you say is, accountability. Ensure you're accountable, which certain persons would even gladly volunteer to do that, because people would like to help out. So I think that's very useful. And I thought you at some point mentioned that they can come to Aluko and everybody, but I guess
Sure.
yeah, but thank you very much. So a follow-up to that, we'll be still talking about corporate governance. When you look at the space, startup space, small companies, what mistakes do you see people making? What are some key mistakes that you see?
So I think one mistake that a founder or founders can make is to think that their ideas alone are the things that are going to take the company to the next level. Your ideas are great, and they're very fanciful and all of that, but sometimes even these founders need to be managed, and that's why you need a board. You need people who are going to be checking off certain things, people who are going to be acting as checks and balances, which is why it's important to have a board. For example, in Nigeria, you can't have the MD of a company cannot also be, well, not just any company, a financial institution, and even a fintech cannot be the chairman of that same board. You need someone who is going to pull you back every now and again to say, look, you need to take a look at this thing that you're doing. This innovative idea is great, but we're going to run foul. Or this money that you want to take from this investor is great, but have we done our DD on this investor? Because one of the things that the CBN prohibits is actually for a fintech to be used as a funnel for money laundering. So you need to be sure that whatever you're doing your due diligence on your investors. It seems attractive when someone wants to put money in your company. Of course, that the whole idea is to grow and to become the next big thing. However, you need to be very circumspect. And sometimes the founder's ambition continues to drive them such that they're not really willing to stop at any roadblock. They just want to go. And even when you're trying to advise them and pull them back, they say, look, you either get on board or you get out. No, you can't do that. So for best practices, you need to actually ensure that you're not only are you do you have a board, but you need to be listening to that board, and that board needs to be deliberating on things like that. So you want to take money on, you need to be sure that the funds are not proceeds of crime. You need to be sure that you're not running afoul of the law. So you need to actually, the founders, I find most times need to be managed, need to be managed by the other members of the board.
Thank you very much. That's very insightful. I think it was at the last edition of this event that I think someone had said that in the financial sector, yeah, you're gaining a lot, but one single mistake can cost you a lot. One wrong business transaction can cost you a lot. So and as much as these companies want to grow, you have to be very mindful.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and you've been saying board since, and I knew we'd have to come to it. When I was a bit younger, when I heard boards, I just think about public companies. But of course, I know that it's not just public companies that should have board members. And more importantly, earlier this year, something I've noticed is anytime there's probably an issue with a company or there needs to be an investigation, one of the findings or recommendation is either the company should have a board, right, which sometimes I'm even surprised. I'm like, oh, they didn't have a board, right? But then I remember that, it's a startup, or you need to probably reconstitute the board. So it shows that the board of directors are very important. And so if they're very important, I'm curious, how should startup founders, players in the space think about their board? Like, who should they select? Yes, it's important to have some of your investors, right? I think it's even a requirement. Some people would, invest and ask for a board seat. But beyond that, how should they think about that?
Great. Okay, so it's important to think about the people who make up your board. Like I said earlier, it's not enough to have a board because your regulator says so, or because good corporate governance practices demand so. You need to have a board and make sure that board members are actually people who are adding value to that organization. They're not just people who are just on the board just for the sake of having a name and saying, this is my board of directors. No. The board needs to meet frequently, so maybe like once every quarter, to actually discuss the affairs of the company, because matters, the day-to-day matters, things can be done by the founder, the MD. However, when it comes to taking certain decisions, even to review the things that are being done, the board needs to meet. And you need to have people who are adding value, like I said. You need to have people who have a little bit of experience of running businesses or engaging in organizations. So for example, if you're thinking of having a chairman on your board, you need to think of someone who has probably also midwifed an organization in the past, someone who has played in that space, or someone who you know has good business acumen, who can steer the direction of the board on the right track whenever they seem to be going off, or whenever there's a disagreement, because we're human beings, there'll always be disagreements as to methods and ways of doing things. You need to think about diversity. You don't want to have an all-male board. You need to think about diversity. It's very, very important. You need to have, and by the way, it's actually, there's studies that show that companies that are gender diverse have success on the long run. They seem to be a lot more sustainable. Even the investors look at things like that. So for example, when people want to invest, especially foreign entities, they look at your ESG, you know, so E being environmental, social, then G, governance. They look at your ESG and see how much your company is aligning with ESG, and to see whether you're actually doing those things. So for example, if they come and they want to put money in your organization and they see that maybe you have a board of 7 people and no female or just 1 female, they may not really take you seriously. So you need to think about gender diversity in populating your board, and not just having gender diversity, but of also ensuring that the people who you're putting on board are actually going to be adding value, people who are going to be making meaningful contributions when you have meetings.
Thank you very much. That's a very important point. That's an important table to shake. Right? It's important to have women and just make it diverse beyond the women, also a diverse board, because when you think about it, a company is a
sorry, and a workforce as well, a diverse workforce.
True, actually. Yeah, a diverse workforce, because a company is made up of different parts, 7 different parties, so it's important to factor that in. And you know, just to touch on the point you made, I was looking up, I read, according to a 2015 African Development Bank report, I think only 12% women, boards generally in African companies were made up of just 12% of women. And in terms of countries that are ranked high, I think Ghana had the most, which is about 19%. Then, so it was Kenya first, then Ghana, then I think some other country. Nigeria was probably somewhere down that list. But that was a 2015 report. I'm curious about whether there's been any more recent one done, or maybe they should do a recent one to find out what that looks like, because the world is definitely a different place than what it was in 2015, but definitely very important. Thank you very much. So we've spoken about the board, very important, but even in the board, the chairperson of the board is very important, because it's somewhat similar to how you say the CEO of the company is very important. And I'm curious, how should you think about who should be the chairperson of the board? Should it be a, permit me to say, a godfather kind of person who's able to, you know, or someone who has deep networks or connections, right, to be able to pull certain strings? So how do you think about it? Because I know very certainly, I've heard, I know that there are dynamics around like the board. You need to ensure that different parties are well aligned. So how should the companies think about this?
So when you're thinking about a chairman, the most important thing is to think about capacity, right? Now that person may or may not be a godfather. You know, I don't the term alone, but really and truly, when you're thinking about your board, the chairman of the board, the most important thing is to think about what the person brings to the table. It's good to have someone with a strong network because they can actually pull in the required resources or attention that you need as an organization. So that's important. Maybe not necessarily a godfather type person. And it doesn't even have to be only your chairman who has a large network. You need to have at least one or two people on your board who are able to reach out, who have a large network, who can reach out to even your regulators as well. You know, because sometimes companies do things and they get into trouble. That person may or may not be your chairman, but the most important thing is that the chairperson has to be someone who is firm enough. And in companies, chairmen have casting votes when there's like a tie or something. So you need to be sure that it's someone who is objective, someone who can take very good decisions when it comes to businesses, and someone who the other members of the board would respect and defer to in such situations. So those are things you actually need to look out for in the chairperson of your board.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's very important. You know, these days when I hear like news of maybe someone joining a company, or I look at startups and I say, oh, this person's on board, just by looking at you know, the person, I'm like, these guys are good, right? Because by getting certain caliber of persons on the board, you're able to, it just saves you a lot of stress because you have people that can give you advice, and beyond even advice, they're able to make a few phone calls and actually even find out what is really happening. Because I mean, in Nigeria and Africa, sometimes someone is telling you this is the problem, but then there is a bigger issue or there's something else. So it's definitely very important, and it just goes on to buttress your point about the fact that ideas are not enough. It's not just enough to have an idea. When you start bringing it to life, there are a number of obstacles that you need different parties to help take care of. So at this point, we'll like to move over to the Q&A session. So I'm sure that people in the audience must have sent in their questions. Yeah, they have. Thank you very much. Okay, I think it's going to be projected soon. I can see it there, but difficult to read. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to read the one, ask you the question I can see the most, the clearest, which is the shortest one. And what extent can the board interfere with the running of it? So I think the person is curious about like how much influence can they have, because you know at the helm of the company is the CEO, and then you have a board. So the person is probably cautious about how much influence.
So in terms of influence, it's really the board takes decisions for the company, right? Of course, there's a CEO who is involved with the day-to-day running of that company, but there will be certain decisions that can only be taken by the board at the level of the board. But in terms of the day-to-day running of the company, the board doesn't necessarily have to get involved.
Okay, thank you very much. So what I'm hearing you say is, of course, there's strategic conversations, where the company gets to align, but day to day, of course, the board members have other things to do.
Yeah, that's what the CEO is there for. That's what he's paid to do.
The CEO is there. So, okay, so I'm kind of struggling to read this, so I'm just going to defer to a question I had before, just to be sure that, can I read it? Okay, so a question I have is, I'll give this scenario first. So earlier in the year, I was having a conversation with an investor in a company, and just talking about people had reached out, employees had reached out, as is the case now, talking about what is going on in the company, what is not right, and all of that. And I said a lot of things, the investor spoke back, and one thing stood out to me, which is, she said, these people have never come, nobody has ever raised this up, right? Meaning, like, she's not heard of it, or he or she has not heard of it. And I thought, the first thing that came to mind, do those people even know that, you can escalate such matters upwards? Because many times you're working in a company and all you see, the ceiling you see is the CEO, right? You don't know that there is more. And interestingly, what I now did was, when anytime people reach out, I ask, is there anybody else you can reach out to, or how can you escalate? And then most of the time people are like, I don't know. And what happens really is, man, when there's no way to voice out, what is wrong or right, people typically just say, "Ah, it's not my company. Let me pack my bag and be going if it's too much for me." So I'm curious, it's not just about whistleblowing, but just about like the channel or flow of information, because there's a reason why there's a board, there's a reason why. How do you think companies can do a better job of ensuring that, I don't know, employees know that, or this flow of information between the employees and the board? Because I realized that I think for startups, it's really a thing where they don't even know that there are people, even if they're not board members, sometimes
Or
just
even
investors.
channels within the
Yeah, channels,
organization.
yeah, and all of that.
Yeah, it's very important once a company kicks off and you start to hire hire resources persons in that organization to have a code of conduct. Some people, different organizations call them different names, but you should actually have a code of conduct that regulates what everybody does in that organization and how things are expected to be done. And when things are not done properly, what consequences there are, and how to escalate things. So like you said, the person you were speaking to is probably like a very junior person who feels they don't really have much of a stake. And to be honest, even the employees are actually part of your stakeholders in your organization. And we're talking best practices. So it's very important to set out those policies as an organization and not just keep your employees guessing how to deal with situations when they arise. Those things should actually be out there, upfront, accessible to all your employees, even if you have only 6 or 7 employees.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think that's something that's very important. And I think over the next year, I think it will become more popular, because I think that many times people care, people want to share feedback, and alternative is just to walk away without. But thank you very much. It's very useful. The next question this person is asking is, is it possible, and I think you might have answered this, but still it's important to reemphasize, like, is it possible to have a board without an investor, right? In cases where the founder is the financial sponsor. So it's like you brought in all the money, right? You don't need, is it possible to have a board? I think yes.
Yes.
Or even if the board member is not an investor, right? Either way, but you can just comment.
Yes, you can have a board with or without investors. The whole essence of having investors coming on board is when you're trying to set up at that preliminary stage or the early stage of the life of your company, and you want to you don't really have money to pay people the kind of people that you're looking to put on your board, but they're your investors, and like I said, they have the end goal in mind. So they're not really concerned about earning from that company at that point in time. So that's when you have investors. But if you have a founder who made all the rain and doesn't really need investors, then you don't have to go all out to go and find investors to be on your board, but you should still have a board.
Thank you very much. This next question, I think it's, this person is asking, in constituting a board of advisors, what percentage of shares is advisable to give to them? And I think at this point I know there's board members, there's a board of advisors, so first of all, is there a dichotomy between the two? Then also the point about giving shares, I think that's...
So those are part of the things that so the board advisors and the board of directors are very different, yes. But for your board advisors, if I heard the question correctly, in terms of shares, those are things that you would agree even before they come on board. You may, sometimes that's the way of remunerating them by allotting shares to them in that organization. But those are things that need to be pre-agreed before they come on board, so that, and it's just for the sake of transparency as well.
Yeah, so I think the person, I know the person was hoping for a more, it's like, tell me how much I should give them, but...
That's a business decision.
Yeah, I should probably see her at the office, not here.
No, it's a decision that the company will have to make. It's a business decision for the company in the sense that it's not really a question, but of course you can't just give all your shares to one person or majority of your shares, because that person has rights tied to those shares. So those are things that you also have to think about when you're allotting shares to people.
Yeah, thank you. And also depends on how much value the advisor is bringing on board. But I'm sure you figure it out. or you, yeah. This next question, I think this person might be in a spot. It's like, what's the procedure for adding or removing a honorary chairman on the board of a company? So,
what's the honorary chairman? Well, there's you have to meet. The board will need to meet and agree that, because he's still on the board, there's a process for removal of directors or members of a board of directors, and you have to just make sure that you comply with the process of removal so that the person does not come back to sue you and say, I was not removed properly. So that's just it. It's not.
That sounds like just a meet, talk, and agree. I guess if all other
No,
parties
you have to vote. Yes, there's like by voting and
by
all
voting.
of that.
So whoever you are, just talk to the other people, rally them around, and either add or
I gang up against you.
No, I said rally, not gang. But yeah.
But you have to do things properly, and there's procedures under company laws that provide for how board members are removed.
Yeah.
It has to be followed strictly.
Yeah, thank you. Next question. So, person is asking, how liable are board members when things go wrong? I mean,
Can you say that again, please?
wait, I'm reading. How liable are board members when things go wrong? I mean, what is the extent of their culpability? Can they be sued alongside the company? This person is really.
So to start with, let's get something clear. Board members are not necessarily owners of the company. And even in terms of liability, right, members of a company or the owners of a company are only liable to the extent of their holding in that company. That's one. Having said that, when things go wrong in a company, it's the company that you will sue, not the board members, of course, except you can now, and I don't want to get all, start speaking legalese now, but unless, of course, you can find that maybe the individual directors have done something that the board, did not sanction or something like that, then you can now say that maybe in fact, that's even a minority, a shareholder who can bring that kind of action against a director or against the other members of the board. But when a company is in trouble, the directors or the board members are kind of separated from the company, because the principle is that a company and its owners are separate. They may be the owners, but they're not the same thing as a company. A company has a life of its own. So if there's any issue in the company, it's that company that needs to answer for its maybe breach or whatever it is.
Yeah, thank you very much. So, Tosin specializes in litigation and dispute resolution. So, in case you're about to sue,
but disputes can always be resolved.
Yeah, so just come to her, she will help you.
We like to sit across the table to find alternative means. We don't always have to go to court.
Yeah, we don't always have to fight like that. So, thank you. This next one, the person is asking, and I didn't know this was a thing, but said there is a concept that boards are deadweights that tend to slow innovation. I didn't know that that's a concept. Anyone familiar with that concept here? Well,
I've heard that before.
Yeah, good. So what's your view?
So I don't think so. Sometimes it may be that way, but like I said, sometimes a founder has this vision and just wants to go, and it's that vision that continues to drive them, or even the ambition, because I'm seeing my company as the next Fortune 500 company. My company is the next hottest thing in Nigerian fintech space. So, but the thing is that the whatever ideas or innovation that the founders may be conceiving in their minds, they always have to run it by the board. And the board is there to provide checks and balances. So they're not necessarily a clog in the wheel. And that's why, so your board meets maybe quarterly or something to discuss these things. And the whole essence is just to be sure that the founder is being checked and that the founder is not just running based on emotions and saying, oh, I need to get this done, I need to get that done. Because the function of the board is to ensure that things are being done properly. One of the functions is to ensure that things are being done properly. So they're not necessarily slowing down innovation. That's not to say that, because I mean, that would be the case if maybe every week the board is coming up with something, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that. But there are times that it is actually very necessary for a board to step in to say, no, we see where you're going, we hear what you're saying, but we've been in this situation before, or we've been in business longer than you. We don't think this is the best course to tow in these circumstances. So they're not necessarily hampering innovation. It's a necessity and it's best practice.
Thank you, Tosin. So whoever asked the question, her view is that they are not dead.
They're just slowing them down.
Slowing down. But yeah, thank you very much. Away from the question of our board, someone is asking, beyond setting a functional board, are there other key aspects of corporate governance?
Yes, beyond the board, corporate governance, it has to do with the policies that the company goes by, the ethos of that company, organization. So there are things that as an organization, you should say that we will do this, and there are some things that as an organization we say we're not going to do this. And as a fintech, don't forget that you're regulated, and the central bank can come heavily on you. That's even if you're not, if you're a public company, you also have the SEC as well to contend with. So beyond having a board, there are different things. So requirements for an organization, you have reporting obligations, you have to have your financial statements and all of that. You have to ensure that you're being audited, that your accounts are being audited on an annual basis. So those are things that you need to do, and those are not necessarily board functions, but things, systems, structures that the company has to put in place for transparency and accountability.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, just acting ethically is actually, it's a thing, it's a very important aspect. And I think something that's fascinating is that many of the changes that have been introduced to corporate governance has been as a result of someone acting unethically. For example, early 2000, when the Enron scandal and then the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, which made things more scrutiny to companies, especially public companies, and all of that, the evolution or separation of power, chairman, cannot be CEO, all of that, even down to how long audit companies can audit, can work with a company, all of that. So definitely just acting ethically, which should seem like something that's very straightforward, is a major component of corporate governance. Or like in Nigeria, we say, use your church mind, right? Just do the right thing, and
exactly.
That would.
And like you said, in Nigeria, we don't, the role of the MD and the chairman are separated, and the persons are actually separated. I know that in the US, they tend to have this chairman MD thing going on all in one person, but in other climes and in Nigeria as well, it's separated. And in fact, the BOFIA, that's the Banking and Other Financial Institutions Act, actually stipulates that it's in black and white. They have to be separate persons, separate individuals.
All right, thank you very much. These two questions seem quite similar, so I'll read them out both. So this person asking, does constituting a capable and diversified board guarantee success of a fintech? Let's hold it. Then the next person saying, it's always said that the main goal of the company is to make profits, and that practicing good corporate governance doesn't always guarantee success. Which should you prioritize? Now I'm even confused.
I'll take it together. It's correct. The fact that a company has good corporate governance does not necessarily guarantee that it will be profitable. But at the same time, it will almost guarantee you success on the long run. Yes, it makes your company sustainable on the long run, because at the end of the day, when your investors are coming in, they want to see certain things in place. And if those things are not in place, they're happy to walk away from that organization, or from even giving you a dime. So it's very, very important to have certain corporate governance structures in place. Will that guarantee profit? Maybe not immediately, but if your company is successful on the long run, it will eventually become profitable, I hope.
Yeah, thank you very much for adding that time horizon factor. Because when you say successful, when you say profitable, I mean, how are you talking 1 year, 2 years, 5 years? Are you talking 10 years? You know, those are
Long
things.
term.
Yeah,
Some
so those are
companies
things.
come in and, as they say, they blow immediately, you know. And for some companies, it may take longer. I guess sometimes it's time and chance, right? And the kind of innovation that you're bringing in. So those are things that actually play a role, and the climb in which you're operating. You have to also factor all those things in. Those are things that impact on your profits.
Yeah, so just whoever asks that question, just factor in time into it. Yeah, thank you very much. So I think this next question, the person might have joined a bit afterwards, but it's still important. The person is asking, are board members paid salary or just allocated a share of the company's holdings? So,
Board members don't actually have to hold shares in a company. Salaries also no. So there's some. So for the MD and the people who hold executive roles, yes, they are on a salary. But for non-executive members of a board, they don't earn a salary. But you, of course, when they sit, they earn allowances for sitting and things like that. But they don't necessarily draw. And they don't also have to own shares in that company. The owners of the company, apart from the founder, who obviously is the owner. And sometimes the founder may not necessarily even be sitting on the board, but the members of the board don't necessarily have to hold shares in the company.
okay, so I know that board members tend to pay like sitting allowances. Does that work?
It depends on the arrangement with for startups. I don't know. I mean, if the company is still struggling to break even, at that point in time, the list of your worries is sitting allowance or whatever stipend you're going to be earning. It's actually to come. You're being brought on board for what value you're adding to the board.
Yeah, so just to have a question, just work it out with the board member. And these days, I mean, while people's time are very valuable, the good thing about the last few years is that now you now have many things happen online. So you don't even have to travel to a physical location to have this conversation.
A lot of board meetings happen virtually these days.
Yeah, so
thanks to COVID.
Well, we're thanking COVID now. But yeah, I guess some things, definitely thanks to COVID. But yeah, thank you very much. That's definitely very helpful. I see this question staring at me. It seems like the one we answered before. How can the founder handle crisis within the board? Now, it's not a specific question, and I don't know if there's anything you want to say about it. Maybe the person is currently facing crisis within his board.
So, in terms of crisis within the board, so to start with, you need to, that's why it's important to, okay, so I imagine the person is already facing a crisis, but it's important to obviously know the kind of people that you're bringing on board to be members or to be directors in your organization. But when there's a crisis, I'm sure, again, if you have like a charter, for example, a company in the early stages may not necessarily have a board charter, but those are things that are very important to put in place, or to even just start noting down how the board intends to deal with certain things. And a lot of the time you find that conflict resolution and things like that are dealt with in such documents. So it would depend on whatever you have agreed at the beginning of your setting up your board. Those are the things that would now come to play when there's a crisis or when there's a dispute in the company. But really, most of the time, you just have to keep having meetings and upon meetings, and that's why you have a chairman as well on the board who will sort of provide like a stability factor and sort of just try to resolve issues amicably between board members.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tosin. I guess, board members are also human beings, and anywhere they are human beings, it's
bound to be
conflict. And, it could be with board member, it could be with the chairman that she's saying she meet.
Like the person that wants to take out their honorary chairman.
So, yeah, but if you have crisis or anything, just go meet Tosin. She's expert at that. She would, Yeah,
Sure,
hopefully they'll be settled
I'm
out
happy
of
to help.
Yeah, but thank you everyone. We've come to the end of the session now, and it's very insightful learning about better corporate governance practices. Thank you everyone for listening. After this, thank you, Tosin. So after this, we'll be going on a short break. So please go get something to drink or to eat. All right. Thank you. Hello. So the break is for 10 minutes. 10 minutes short break. 10 minutes.
There's no break. Please come back to your seats. We're gonna keep going. I'm so sorry. I lied. We all lied. There's no break. Please sit down. JK, just kidding. Please sit down. Apologies. There's no break. We lied. There's no break. Please sit down. We're very sorry. Through that back. Apologies. Michelle, you're looking good. I like your hair. I'm so sorry. Tosin, you're looking good. I like your kaftan. We lied. There's no break. Please, hello. Please sit down. We're going to continue. Okay. You can stretch your legs a little bit, wiggle around a little bit, but we're going to continue because apparently there's momentum and we don't want to change that. So sorry. Apologies. Thank you so much. I appreciate you so much. I appreciate you guys. Thank you. We'll have a chance to network and talk to each other. Thank you to Daniel and Tosin. That was a fantastic session. We're ready to learn some more. Who's excited to learn? Yay. Okay, let's sit down so we can get this party started. Thank you. Thank you so much. Sorry about lying and deceiving you guys about the break. But there will be a longer one after this session. And there'll be food. I actually saw mini muffins outside. It's looking good, guys. It's looking good. Okay, thank you guys so much. That session was pretty insightful. Am I right? Yes? Yes? Thumbs up. Did we enjoy that session? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to move quickly ahead to the next session. We're going to be talking about fundraising, how fintechs can effectively raise funds. If there's one thing you need to know, it's that Nigerian startups, especially fintech startups, account for up to at least 70% of the total amount of funding that the entire continent has seen. So we're clearly doing something right, but as more fintechs come into the market to address a lot of financial services needs, it's important to know how to raise money. And we have a really great panel for this. So I'm going to invite the speakers up and the moderator. So moderating this session is Osaho, who is the group head, consumer payments at Ecobank. Thank you. Please clap them up. Thank you. And he'll be joined by Yele, who is co-founder and CEO of Duplo, Lexi, general partner at Norskin 22, Chinedu, managing director at Missouri Solutions Limited, and Ms. Yemi Carey, co-founder Rising Tide Africa. Thank you guys so much.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the first section on corporate governance. My name is Osahan, and I head up consumer payments for Ecobank Group. And we're going to be speaking about fundraising in the fintech space. You know, when we started this fintech breakfast, we wanted to do things that created value for the ecosystem, and this particular topic is one that had been coming up over and over again. In 2021, about $5.2 billion flowed into African tech startups in the form of venture funding. And about 60% of that amount was to fintechs. Now, that's not a surprise because it's a very attractive sector. A recent report that was published by McKinsey & Company in August this year put it at about $4 to $6 billion in terms of revenues that the fintech firms have earned in 2020. And they project that that could go up 8x by 2025 to up to $30 billion. So it's no surprise that people are interested in this space. Now, at the same time, on the global landscape, when it comes to investing, this year there has been a bit of a slowdown. Some major fintech unicorns have had to take a haircut to their valuation in order to be able to close the funding rounds that they were in. So this panel will talk about what's happening on the African fintech landscape, both from the perspectives of operators and investors. I'm joined by a distinguished panel of speakers here, and I will introduce them quickly. To my left here is Yele, who's the co-founder and CEO of Duplo, which is a Y Combinator-backed fintech firm that focuses on B2B solutions for payments. And they recently closed the funding round, so you will have some interesting perspectives to share. We also have Lexi, who is the general partner for Norskin 22, which is a tech growth startup fund that is backed by up to 30 unicorn founders. And they are focused on helping some of very, very innovative and disruptive businesses in Africa scale up. We have on my right-hand side Chinedu, who is the managing director for Mzuri Solutions, which is a startup business solution provider that is focused on the SME space. And then also Yemi, who is the co-founder of Rising Tide Africa, which is a movement that was initiated to improve the, or should I say increase the participation of women in angel investing as an asset class. And she's also on the board of advisors, or should I say board of governance for Lagos Angel Network and the Africa Angel Groups as well. So very interesting speakers who are going to be sharing their perspectives. And I'm going to start off here with Yele. And what's going to happen is each of these speakers will speak for about 5 to 7 minutes. And then when they're all done with the first round of speaking, then it will be open for questions. I do want to encourage you to start sending your questions via Slido, because we'll accumulate them, and once they're done with the first round of speaking, then we'll get into the questions. So with that, I'll hand over to Yele, who will give us a little bit of perspective on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Asaha. Good morning, everyone. So I've been fighting malaria the past week, so my voice is a bit shaky. But I'm very glad to be here. I really hope some of my experiences will be useful for some founders here today, this morning. Like Asahan said, my name is Yele Oyekola. I'm one of the co-founders of a company called Duplo. Duplo is a B2B payments company based out of Lagos. We enable businesses to simplify their account payables, account receivables, and their reconciliation as well. We've been around for just over a year, and we went live sometime in January of this year, so it's still under a year. We've gone through 2 rounds of funding. I'm not an expert in fundraising at all, but I think I'm gonna have some experience or tips that might be helpful for some founders here today. So the way I would just like to speak about this will be in 3 parts. One would be what founders need to know about fundraising. 2 would be some of the challenges that founders and my founder friends are facing trying to raise money across different rounds. And then lastly would then be how do you actually close a round? So we have been through 2 rounds of funding, and what founders need to know. So one is, why should you raise money? If you don't raise money, you can't grow, especially if you're running a tech business. You have a lot of businesses that are able to bootstrap, but right now things are very competitive. You have a lot of companies trying to solve the same problem the same way. So for you to get to a point whereby you can be profitable, you might need to actually raise money. That's one. 2 is, when should you raise money? You have a lot of founders, including ourselves, who raise money quite early. When we hadn't figured out the market, we had no clue what we were doing. I think we raised our first round 2 months after we launched. And this can be a bad thing sometimes, because we actually made a pivot with Duplo. So only raise money when, 1, you are sure of what you're trying to solve, you understand how big the market is, and you actually have a solid team that is trying to solve that problem as well. 3 is, how much should you raise? you have a lot of founders who go to presentations and go to pitches and they're saying, we're trying to raise $2 million for 5 months of runway or 12 months of runway. And many times this isn't the right way to pitch investors. There has to be a goal for that money. So we're trying to raise $5 million to achieve so and so over the next 12 months. I think that's more effective than just basing that off your runway. And lastly is in terms of valuation. It's a very touchy subject. But what we're seeing right now is that a lot of companies are going through significant decline in valuations. I think only raise at a valuation that you're sure that you can actually achieve over the next 12 months, 18 months before your next round of funding. So that's the first section. And then the second section is some of the challenges I'm seeing ourselves at Duplo face when we're raising our seed round, some of my founder friends as well. So one is we're seeing a significant, like I said earlier, decline in valuations. Deals are taking forever to close. Deals that were taking about a month or 6 months, sorry, 6 weeks, are taking about 3 months now to close. So we closed our seed round within, I think, about 6 weeks. That would never happen now, in my opinion, just because things are now stricter, investors are looking for much more solid metrics. So things are very different right now, and a lot of founders are struggling with the environments right now. Thirdly, as well, is that we're seeing investors dig incredibly deep into your numbers. So a lot of founders in Nigeria or in Africa tend to confuse GMV, for example, with revenue. And we're seeing investors ask, is that actually revenue? How do you calculate that revenue? So I think founders need to also be very careful in how they portray the numbers to avoid any issues with investors, because it's a very small ecosystem, news go around. So we have to be very careful on how we portray our numbers and metrics to these different investors. And then the tech section that I would speak about is, so how do you close a round? And this will be based off my own experience at Duplo. So we had launched our first round last year, August. Peter there led the pre-seed round. What's up? That took about a month to 6 weeks to close. And then we went for a seed round after YC. Now, I think as a YC company, it's much, much easier to raise money than not. So my experience is quite skewed, to be honest. But I think there are 3 main things that investors are looking for. One is, how solid is your team? Have you guys done this before? Is there any key insight that you guys have in this market that might be very interesting? And how much experience do you have as well? So that's one. 2 is, how big is the market? Everyone keeps saying there's a lot of fintechs, fintech is getting all the money. It's just because the market is massive for fintech. For example, at Duplo, when you think of business payments, it cuts across BNPL for businesses, international payments, collections, reconciliations. It's a massive market when you tell investors that. And I think lastly is momentum as well. So how fast have you grown in the previous months? So we were very lucky when we raised our pre-seed round because we had no, it was very early days. But I think we Capital, we led our pre-seed round, were very bullish on the team, the market size, and we were able to close that pre-seed round then. I think something else that I see a lot of founders doing that works is actually using your angel investors or your pre-seed investors to close your seed round. So I remember vividly when we were going for a seed round, we Capital had written a detailed memo on Duplo, about 30 pages. I didn't pitch much really, and that was the memo that I used to close the seed round, because every investor that reached out to me, I'll just be like, yeah, this is Duplo, go read it. And that was very helpful to closing our seed round. So I would say that please use your current investors very closely, because they also want you to close the round because it helps the valuation increases. So try and keep them close. So right now, what we're doing now is we're at seed stage. We should be going for a Series A soon. Well, we'll see how it goes. Yeah, sure. And I think what we're trying to do now is I'm trying to engage with current investors and potential investors. I go to the States quite often to just meet them in person because that's where literally the funding is. So trying to build those relationships early on before you start raising money also is very important as well for founders. I'll just pause there and pass it to Lexi.
Okay. And Lexi, I don't know if you want to share some perspectives on.
Yeah, maybe I'll first give a little bit of introduction on what we're doing in the market. So I've personally been investing in Africa tech, especially Nigerian technology companies, for about 10 years now. We invested in some of the first rounds of companies like Paystack and Flutterwave, Migo, Pharma. So some of these companies that were kind of the first technology companies really, I think, to lay the rails for everybody that has come after them, and also spun out a lot of incredible talent in the process, which has given the Nigerian ecosystem, I think, a huge heads-up advantage relative to the rest of the markets across Africa. With our current fund, so we joined forces with two other partners that are in other regions in Africa. So another partner is based in Nairobi, and a third party is based in Johannesburg. And we're investing really in those core markets. I'm still here in Lagos, of course. But we have a $200 million fund that really takes the likes of Duplo and takes them to the next level and helps them really scale up across not only their one market being Nigeria or whatever it is, but to other markets across the continent, and to help them get to a point where we think that they're either ready to list on a publicly traded stock exchange, or hopefully for a lot of these, there actually will be a pretty aggressive consolidation strategy across the continent. And we want to build those billion-dollar, multi-billion-dollar companies from our investee companies. So yeah, what we have really seen, I'm sure as you can imagine, are a lot more conservatism in the market in the past couple of months. And I think it's only just beginning. I think this is going to be a long, cold winter, unfortunately. But we're really seeing a lot of those international investors that were writing Africa checks, probably not doing a lot of work, but just doing as kind of a learning exercise. They're pulling back aggressively. They're not writing those checks into Africa. But those international platforms that had an Africa-focused team, they're continuing to write checks. And they still see the market here as something where, rather than facing, reduced consumer spending and high inflation and all of those other worries that you're seeing in technology ecosystems across the world, we're facing a different problem here. We're trying to get the underpenetrated consumer and business into the digital ecosystem, and that market itself is massive, and you're not going to see the same slowing growth as you're probably seeing in a lot of other developed markets. So I think that the smart investors who have really thought about their Africa strategy are continuing to deploy checks. To Yele's point, I mean, certainly much lower valuations. They're doing a lot more work on due diligence. So the comments on numbers, I mean, we've seen due diligence procedures now where they're not only digging into the numbers, but they're requiring access to bank statements to actually verify that what the founders say is reality. A couple months ago, that wasn't the case. People were writing checks, rounds were rushed. People were taking, I think, a lot of bets based on the quality of the team and the market potential that they saw without really verifying numbers. We're now seeing due diligence processes for Series A stage deals of 3 months, sometimes even longer. What else can I say? I would echo everything that he said, maybe to add one more thing. It's not just the growth and momentum that these companies are seeing now. What is mattering a lot more to investors is, of course, growth matters, customer engagement matters, but it's also how efficient have you been managing your cash, and how are your margins looking. So if you're, for example, if you've raised $2 million, you've spent that all on customer acquisition, and your customers, they use the platform because of free transaction fees or whatever it is, but they don't really stick around and drive a lot of value on that platform. It doesn't really show that you've built something meaningful, and I think a lot of investors, especially in this market, won't be attracted to that growth at all. Okay, I'll leave it at that, and I'm sure there'll be a lot more questions.
Thank you, Lexi. Okay, so we move over to Chinedu now, who will share some perspectives.
All right. My name is Chinedu. I lead a small business that looks after small businesses as well. We provide software as a service that enables small businesses to do their day-to-day operations from accounting to bookkeeping and to their tax management. I'll be speaking from the perspective of someone who has been in rooms where decisions are being made about investment, someone who has been in the course of getting investments himself, and someone who operates within a network of people who also seek investments. And I won't be speaking from the perspective that KK talked about how to raise money, but I will be speaking to the things that a founder, an entrepreneur needs to know even before he sets out. Okay, there's a story I will start about a certain gentleman called Scott. He told the story himself. He was one of the early startups in the real estate business. And he got his investment when he started, and he was moved by his passion and his ambition to continue to grow. So he continued to get his investments. At each round, he started with, when he started his firm, he had about 80%. At each round, he went down to 60, and 5 years down the line, because of the speed, he created a business that required a lot of funding, a lot of financing, needed more money, and 5 years down the line, he wasn't part of the business again, literally. That's one. And what was the lesson out of that engagement? The lesson out of that engagement was that, one, he grew faster than he needed to grow. Two, he took more money than that the business needed. So for each time you take money, the pressure comes. And if the pressure comes, if there's money to be taken, you take more money and you take yourself out of the business. It speaks to what I think Yele mentioned about only go for money when you need that money. If you don't need it, you don't go for it. Then the other one is about, okay, it also speaks to getting money when you don't need it. Don't go for money when you don't need it. So a certain gentleman, I was in a room where he came with all the beautiful ideas, and he said, they asked him, what do you need the money for? The money was to set up a data center. And the CEO of the firm he came to, of a bank, okay, he came to say to him, I can give you my data center. I can give you everything you need to do off your data center. And the gentleman insisted, no, I need cash. And he didn't get that cash. And he didn't get that, he didn't get that investment. So that again speaks to, if people, sometimes it's not fund that is required. If what you need that fund to do, someone comes to you with an option that gives it to you, it could be a good way. It could be something that at this stage of your work, this would solve your problem. I think that for an entrepreneur, go for it, get it, and use it to solve the problem. But most importantly, going into fundraising, ask yourself, or even starting the business, what do I want to do on the long run? Where do I want this thing to be in the next 4 years, in the next 5 years? Once you have clarity of that, then you would need, you will be more deliberate about it, you'll be more conscious about it, you get in the right cycle, you get advice. Seek advice, very important, and you'll be able to get through. Another point I want to also mention is that the journey is not always as smooth as Yele has mentioned it. Okay? When it's not smooth, sometimes you need to be patient. At other times, even if when the fund comes, it's not in your best interest. Okay? People always speak about entrepreneurship and doing these things from what works. It's also very important to know what does not work. And what does not work is knowing when not to raise funds, or when knowing who not to raise funds from. Okay? But having known all of these things, it is more about there's time and chance perspective, and then utilizing whatever fund comes your way in a very deliberate manner, and then using it for the purpose you set out for. Because when you use it for the purpose you set out for, there's clarity. It opens the door for you to get to the next round. And when you don't use it for the purpose, sometimes it leads to people becoming going out of their way not to do the right things, not to say the right things. Issues of corporate governance will break down, and ethics will break down, and it will not work. So my summary of my perspective is that, one, go for fundraising when it's utterly necessary. Raise, because there's a balance, you need to balance two extremes. One, raising sufficient money that you need, and one, ensuring that you have, not you have control, ensuring that you're able to continue to manage that business. Because if you outrun yourself, you will lose control. Sometimes that control is also necessary to drive the vision, okay? And sitting in the rooms where those decisions are made, one of the things that people also look at is how much stake do you have in the business? The more you raise these things, and if it's too early and you've lost control, the less likely people are going to trust your ability to continue to run the business and your ability to drive the business into the long run. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chidi. Yes, good round of applause. All right, so now, Yemi, maybe you can share a little bit about your perspective.
Yes, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I run Rising Tide Africa. It's a group of female angel investors. What we are focused in is how we would increase women's participation in angel investing so that we can see it as another asset class. This was birthed predominantly because I was in the room of angel investors over and over again, and you see that the gentlemen come and they get funded. And a few of us, when we see a lady come out to pitch, we're like, okay, maybe this is our chance. And most times, due to no fault of theirs, they don't get funded. They sort of don't have the confidence, or they don't know how to pitch their products or service. And so I think myself and Ndidi were in the room one day and we said, we have to make something happen. These guys can't continue taking all this money. And so there was this lady that came in and pitched fantastically. She had a great product, but she just couldn't convince the investors. And so we told them, guys, just wait, give us 2 weeks, 3 months, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, we'll bring her back. And so we did. And what did we do? We just started to build her confidence, let her understand the things that she needed to convey to the investors. And so we started off Rising Tide. Today we are 89 members strong, and we've invested over $2 million. But we take the first bite. Thank you. We take the first bite, and we take the highest risk. So we look at, okay, you're generating revenue. So you have a product or service and you're generating revenue. But people don't still believe in you, and you've been bootstrapping for a period of time, and it's very tough to be an entrepreneur. And so we look at you, and one of the critical things that we look at is, who is this person really, and why are they doing this? Is it just a me too, or is this just circumstance because you don't have a job and you have a laptop, and so you decide that you want to start off, and I'm the CEO of this and that. So it's pretty much the team that we look at. First of all, the passion that the entrepreneur brings in, the value proposition of what their product or service is looking at. You know, our portfolio is made up of 14% fintech, and what we do is, making sure that as a fintech company, you are not only automating, but you're making things more simple, leveraging on technology to ensure that, the customers get what they're doing. I mean, sometimes we say that, the fintechs are stripping the different functions of a bank or a financial institution and making it more innovative, simpler, and making sure that the customers really have what they need. And so for us, apart from the team and whether they have the experience or whether they're serial entrepreneurs, one other thing that we look for is whether the product whether they are early to market or you're late. Maybe this thing would really pick up in the next 1 year. And so we decide that, okay, it's not yet time, but let's invest. And if we invest, we then help you with the support service that you need to make you investment ready, so that the likes of Lexi, when we take our products to them, they would say, yes, this is a company we want to invest in. One, it helps the entrepreneur grow. Two, it helps us exit. So we are preparing you. And I must say that really we focus on female-owned, female-led, and gender-diverse startups because of the funding gap, access to funds that is limited to the female, and because we are entrepreneurs ourselves and we understand the difficulty that they would have gone through. And increasingly, I mean, 3 years ago I wouldn't have said this, but increasingly the women are coming out. And so we have loads and loads of opportunities that we have to invest in, that we go through. Now we have more due diligence because we have to select out of so many more. And it's important to also understand that, in terms of when you are we are saying that you're investment ready for us, you should be able to convince not only your investors, but have the kind of structure that would outlast you as a startup or as a founder. And that is one of the critical things that we look at. What is your scalability and what is the sustainability of your business at any point in time? Particularly for the fintechs. If you're solving giving a value proposition that would only be, would only make a meaning in Nigeria, and if you look at other economies that are like Nigeria and your fintech cannot grow into that economy, then you are not scalable, and so we just jettison you. So I'll stop there for now, and then we take it up from there. Thank you.
Thank you. Round of applause. Okay, so now we're going to open up to questions. I don't know if you've been putting questions up there, but if you haven't, I have a couple myself. But let me see what we have on Slido. Has anybody submitted anything on Slido? Okay. All right. Well, okay. Okay, so the first question is, how will the owner of a company know if the investor's funds are questionable? Yeah, so that's an interesting one.
Yeah, I mean, you should be doing KYC on your investors, for sure. I mean, that's both soft side, but also on the legal side. So we've actually had, and it's not just the questionability of that investor, by the way, it's also whether they're an accredited investor. So if you're, depends on where you're domiciled, but most technology companies are structuring in the US or Netherlands, sometimes the UK. You are required by law to make sure that your investors have either a certain net worth or salary that makes them a smart investor. And we have had companies in our portfolio, by the way, that have come under SEC investigations because they didn't do such a good job on verifying that those investors were accredited. So that's also something that's very important. There are also third-party resources, software tools, databases that you can some are subscription-based, that you can pay to check to make sure none of your investors are on the sanctioned list. Something that's super important is also making sure that your investors are not politically exposed people. And sometimes that can actually seem like a positive thing when you need a little bit of helping hand dealing with ministers. But a lot of your investors may in the future look very aggressively at this and maybe not even want to participate if some of those investors are alongside of them. So that's just from me as well. But also speak to other, if they're an active investor and they've backed technology companies, speak to some of the companies that they've backed. How helpful have they been as an investor? Some investors have maybe pushed aggressive terms or have actually done things that have been harmful to their investee companies. And there's actually some forums that you have to be a founder to join, where people also share information on how they've had experience with their investors.
Thanks, Lexi. Yes, it's quite true that it's very tempting to want to take the money, but if you don't do your due diligence, then you could run into problems down the road. Okay, so the next question seems to be for Yele because it's speaking about Duplo, and it's asking how many rejections you got before you got your first round of funding.
That's a very good question. So I think we have 60 plus investors, and I probably spoke to about, between both rounds, probably over 100 investors. So if you do the math, that's about 48% said no. And as a founder, you just have to keep on going. A lot of investors are going to say no to you because they don't understand your market. They don't think you're good enough to build a product, which is valid as well. But there will also be investors that strongly believe in your product, believe in your team, and believe in the market. So yeah, just keep on going. But yeah, I'll say about 30% said no to Duplo.
We advise our companies to look at it as a sales funnel. So it is really a volumes game. It's obviously great to understand who you're speaking to, and some of those investors will be more likely to be a good fit for your company. But I mean, probably if you get to the point where you're cold calling, it's like 5% hit rate. So it can be super low. Always ask investors, especially if they're active in the ecosystem, who else they think you should speak to, even if they're not willing to introduce you directly, because that's actually a big ask for very busy people, but just get a couple more names and find out who are those other investors that you should reach out to.
Thank you. Okay, the next question is probably someone who's dealing with the situation now where a major investor wants to pull their money out of the startup. I don't know if any of the panelists want to speak to it.
I'm happy to.
Okay,
cool. But I feel like I'm taking airtime. So if they have signed anything beyond a term sheet, if they've actually signed an investment agreement, they have no legal basis to be able to pull money out, and that is absolutely not something that should be tolerated, and that's something they should have understood from the very beginning. If there's a situation where it's just a term sheet, a lot of times people can, have a commitment on the table and pull their term sheet. Given terms in term sheets, almost in every situation, they're not legally enforceable. So that absolutely does happen. I would say the best thing to do in that case is to say, thank you, we would really appreciate your help and support down the line. Let's keep in contact and never speak poorly about them, because it will come around at some point. If there is a case where the investor is in your company and they want out, so also absolutely no way they can get out, but you can offer to them in a future round that you would be happy to put the offer of their secondary sale up to other investors. Typically how we've seen these structured is about a 20% discount to whatever the company is raising at that round. So it's, it's showing that you really want to help support them, that you want to help them get liquidity, but you're bound by agreements with all of your investors.
Thank you. Okay, so this next question I'm going to direct at Yemi, and it has to do with getting the attention, because you spoke earlier about what you experienced or what you saw happen where people were pitching. Now, here's someone who wants to get the attention of potential investors so that they're able to pitch their business idea to them. Are there avenues or any tips or suggestions?
Pretty straightforward. Some people stalk me on LinkedIn, for instance. So you can use all sorts of medium to connect with investors. Investors are looking for good deals, right? I see pitch decks on my LinkedIn. I see pitch decks in my emails, and I share it with the investment team. Also, it's important for you to be able to network. Go to events like this, network with your peers, and then you would find access to where you can get investors. There are so many other avenues. There are different groups also on LinkedIn. I keep saying LinkedIn because that's where a lot of us are. There are different groups where the investors are on LinkedIn. Check out profiles also. If you look at, there are certain platforms that you can go to VC for instance, and put your deck there, and you'll see a group of investors out there. So there are different types of platforms that you can use to access them for investors, apart from events like this where you meet them.
Can I just add to that as well? I think founders are the most effective way to get through to investors. I get so many friends reaching out to me, and I just pass it on to a lot of investors. So I think that's probably the most effective way. If you're a first-time founder, if you have a network, I think just make friends with other founders, and that would make it much faster to get through to investors, as long as you have a very good idea and team.
Also, just to add, when an investor says no, they're going to pass on your round, that doesn't mean they will always pass on your future rounds. So a great way to keep investors or visibility in front of investors is to have you can set it up in MailChimp or whatever, have investor updates that you send to your investor database just to keep them seeing your metrics and your traction. I open all of those. I actually open those more than pitch decks I receive because it's a concise way for me to really see how those numbers are growing. And then there gets to be a point where I'm like, wow, this is starting to look like it's in my stage, looking good. Let's get serious and engage.
Thanks. So I guess look at other founders, don't take note personally, but keep updating. And definitely, thanks, Yemi, for even plugging this event. And these events are helpful for networking and getting to meet investors. Chinedu, I don't know if you have any points on this particular topic.
What I wanted to speak to was to the fact that having accessing networks such as this and engaging other people is a very suitable way of getting it done. Even searches sometimes, especially if you are undergoing a project that no other person has undergone in the market. If you do detailed searches, you can get some leads, which you can then bounce off other people that you know, and then can get you to where you are. The other one, I've been stressing the fact that speaking to people that have already, other founders, would help a lot, is that some founders, someone that says no to you, what I'm looking for is X. By the time you engage that person, by the time you engage, you say, oh, I met someone who said, what I'm looking for is this. I think this will fit into it. And it opens the door, makes it a shorter cut to get access, to be able to engage. Yeah.
Thank you. The next question is directed at Yemi, and it's really just a very straightforward, confirm if it's only women-led businesses that you fund or you help fund.
Women-owned, women-led, gender-diverse management and team. So we have male-founded businesses in our portfolio. So if your team is predominantly female, we do fund you. If you have a product like Eden Life that services the female gender, then we fund you. So you skew towards that.
Thank you. Yes, definitely. Okay, so the next question is directed at Lexi. And it's basically asking if your Norskin 22 funds.
So no, sorry, not this fund. we will have an allocation starting about mid next year that'll be about $10 million that will do probably late seed to pre-Series A tickets. Right now we are only doing Series A through B. However, there is a seed stage fund kind of under the same family of funds that is doing early stage investments. So yeah, they're pre-seed Africa focused fund as well. So there is somebody that can help feed those deals through.
Okay. I think the next question has already been answered. Best ways to reach out to investors, we've already covered that.
We have, maybe there's one more thing I thought about though, if I can just add to that. So the scene, especially at bigger firms like ours, you know, we have an investment team of 7 people. It's actually not one of the general partners that's probably the best person to, if you're not getting a lot of traction, like sending a pitch deck to me is probably going to get less traction than sending it to one of our investment managers. So they're kind of the ones that are handling a lot of the pipeline and flow and then kind of filtering up the deals that we need to take a look at to us. So that's another thing. Don't always think that you need to have access to the top decision makers. Sometimes it can be the junior level team members.
Okay, thank you for that. And the next one is about licensing. I don't know that. Okay.
Yeah, I can speak to that.
Okay.
The licensing. Sure. Okay. For the Nigerian environment, one of the most trustworthy source that you can use to get information about licensing is the central bank website. And from the central bank website, you'll be able to see all the categories of licenses that are available, and then you now find out which one fits into which one the idea fits into. Once you know that and you understand what it is, you make that connection, then you can then write to the central bank, the payments department. There's a department for the payment systems department. You write into the department, and I'm sure they will invite you, and you'll be able to take it from there through the process of approval in principle to the actual approval, and then you'll be able to run with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chinedu. Okay, Yemi, I think they're going back to you again on the, because they're looking at you and saying, please help me. I'm not only a female, completely female founded or something. Can you invest in female-led companies, CEO with male co-founders?
Yes, we do. So that is female-led. It's female-led, female-owned, female-led, gender diverse management and team, or a solution that caters for the women.
I hope that female CEO is also a co-founder though.
Yeah.
Okay, just making sure.
Okay. Next question is for Yele. When do you think is the best time to apply to Y Combinator as an early stage startup, factoring revenue and customer signups?
I love the way everyone is calling me Diplo, not Yele. When is the best time? Honestly, YC is it's very weird. There's no best time to apply to YC. I think for us, what worked was that we had some early traction, and my co-founders had done this before in their previous businesses. So I think what YC looks for is how fast you're growing, and then the size of the market, and then just how solid your team is as well. And the interview is 10 minutes long. You have to be able to clearly define what you're doing in those 10 minutes. So there's no best time, but of course, apply when you have the idea. They actually pick folks with ideas alone. But I think as long as you can clearly describe what you're doing in a nutshell, that should be good enough to get an interview. But yeah, I hope that helps.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, so this next question, I think it's looking at a startup from, not necessarily from the point of the usual safe or something like that, but it's asking how does a startup decide how much of their profits they are going to share with their investors when they are not public yet. So they don't have a system of shares yet. So I guess they need some education around the area of, okay, so you start something, you get investors in, how do the investors get benefit? It's not going to be in profit sharing necessarily, so there needs to be some education in the answer. Maybe you could take a
for us, it's sweat equity. I hope you did, you listen to Tosin and the lady from Aluko and Oyebode. Corporate governance is very important. Even at the point where you start off your startups, right? It is important for you to actually agree on what kind of takeout the investor is going to have. For some businesses, because the investor is helping you out in the beginning, helping, being the key word, you sort of might want to give them sweat equity when you blow, right? For others, it is important for you to define exactly how much and what the terms and conditions are. And there's so many models now, from safe to convertibles to equity to debt. So you need to define at an early stage so that you not get down and something that was in your ideation stage and you got a 10,000 naira. Now you are making $10 million, and somebody says, I want a certain percentage. So it's important that you do your put into your corporate governance very early.
Thank you. I think we have time for one last question, and I guess this is for the investors. At what point in a startup is the startup too early to receive investment? So maybe speak to the friends and family round and all the things like that. When do you start taking outside investment, if at all?
Maybe I'll start it off with a joke. So you saw this recent round that the previous WeWork founder raised from his previous investors, $350 million, largest ticket they've ever done. And investors were like, look, man, there's nothing here, it's just an idea. And you've screwed up before. How can we have any faith in you? And I don't know if you guys know the founder's name, but Andrew says, don't worry, I'm a new man. So anyway, the point is that I don't know if there is, obviously there's a whole bunch of different factors involved. If you are a very successful founder, or maybe just a founder that has shown he can build a business, and you just have an idea, that could be enough. If you're not, then certainly strong traction. And I'll pass it over to the other side on friends and family and angels.
Yeah, it's never too early, really. Sometimes we invest in your idea. I mean, there is one of our portfolio that, didn't look as if it was going to take off or anything, but we invested, and today, I mean, they're all over the place, right? So it's important to know that first, investors really want that connect with the founder, the trust, the builder of the relationship, because it's really like a marriage going down the line, and that may be what they're investing in. That's your, I know I can do this. Attitude of yours may be what they're investing in, and somewhere down the line you then get a good product or service.
Okay. All right. So we've run out of time for this. Okay. One last question. Are there any major valuation methodologies investors prefer?
Just be factual about your valuation. You see, what is going on in the market right now just shows that a lot of startups were overvalued. So now they're using this as a negotiating point. I will reduce my valuation for you if you invest on my following round. It just says a lot about you. When you started off, you were doing a Me Too. Flutterwave was valued by Y Combinator at $2 million. I'm doing something the same, and so I should be $2 million. So just be very factual about your valuation. There are different methodologies, but what is it that 12 months down the line you can achieve and would meet that kind of valuation should be what you're thinking about. I don't know, Lexi. Yele.
No, I would definitely echo that. I mean, one thing, just maybe something that I might be a little bit counterintuitive, but I would never be the first one to put forward your valuation. If you're too high, it makes it look like you don't know what you're talking about, and a lot of times investors will be like, not even in the right ballpark, I'm not even going to engage. I think it's a lot better to, certainly have an idea internally where you believe your company should be valued, but try to work with investors and try to get an indication of investors how they're thinking about valuation. Maybe some of the valuations of companies that they've seen in the market. Investors have an information advantage over you because they see a lot of flow. We see all the companies, we see what rounds are raising at. Even the headline stories, you see a company raising $50 million round, billion-dollar valuation. We know that there's other terms in that doesn't actually make that valuation what it looks like on headline numbers. So yeah, and then in terms of methodology, I mean, look, it depends on your stage, right? Like, probably your easiest as an early stage company is some sort of revenue multiple or GMV multiple. But again, to Eli's point, we're looking very critically on what is actually in GMV to probably come out to a number. But in a lot of times, you will be raising some sort of convertible equity instrument, and there's a cap and there's a discount in there. Now there's usually most favored nations. I mean, valuation matters, but there's lots of other things that matter in your term sheet as well.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we've come to the end of this panel discussion. I would like you to please give a round of applause for all the panelists for speaking. And I will now hand over to Koromone, who's...
Thank you so much. That was fantastic. Thank you to our panelists. I hope we learned a lot. Yeah, so we've come to the end. However, before we move, okay. So when we're done, we're going to go downstairs to have breakfast breakfast to be honest. And then there's an exhibition as well, which the MD mentioned that we're going to enjoy. Now I'm going to ask Isaac to come give the closing remark, and then we can make our way downstairs. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I think give her a round of applause. I think she's done a fantastic job. Well done. Mine is very, very, very brief. Let me start by thanking our panelists, our speakers for coming. We know how busy you are, and to find time to come and join us here on our second breakfast series, I think it's quite commendable, and thank you very, very, very much. I think we have found it, hoping that you have found it useful, and it should be able to help us as we build the fintech industry. I also want to thank all of you for coming. It's a busy morning, it's a Friday, and also for you being here. I think it's useful. There are several things that I've picked that I just wanted to mention as we close. I think corporate governance is key. We are, as Ecobank, we are deeply committed to the fintech industry. And we want to make sure that these fintech breakfasts address very, very practical things that speak to the industry. And I think corporate governance is key. I think it's powered by the discussion that I've gone in here. I look at corporate governance almost as a time bomb. It lies somewhere on the road until you step on it. And when you step on it, then you are finished. And I think for the fintechs and that are growing, we cannot overemphasize how critical that one is. And I think as a bank doing business in 34 countries, 3 of which are in Africa, very, very much involved in the payment industry, we have an obligation to be able to guide our fintechs to go in the right direction. And so the topics that we discuss in this breakfast series are very, very critical to you building a very sustainable business. I think corporate governance is one of those. Whether you're looking at board selection, customer selection, transaction selection, because it's about what you do and what you don't do. There's a lot of things that you can make money from, but you don't do them because they are not right. And if you don't have a strong board, if you don't have that culture, corporate governance from the start, down the road it will hit you. And when it hits you, it's bad it takes time to recover. And so as we work with fintechs across all our countries, we want to make sure that we guide them using whatever knowledge we have built in this financial services industry over the last couple of years, to be able to guide you to navigate it well so that you can be able to land your company at the right place at the right time, and so you can be able to build something that's strong, that lasts, that endures. all big companies like Ecobank, they were started as an idea just like you. And we believe that by helping you and navigate this series, I think it will be good for you. Data protection, sustained growth, those are all things that came in. And I think from our this last panel, I was just looking at Yemi and feeling a bit jealous. She keeps saying, you know, it's female, 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 female. And I was like, I wish the men could also say, you know, it's only men, 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 men. But very, very inspiring. And I think, I know I'm speaking on behalf of a lot of, you know, fintech, a lot of people with ideas here. And I think if you are a female and you see a role model saying they are there to guide you, I think it's inspiring. Very, very, very inspiring. And so we want to thank you specifically, you know, for you being here. So I think with that, I want to also appreciate our MD, Bolaji Lawal, for being here this morning to do the opening remarks. And I want to encourage all of us. Yes, please give him a round of applause. It's great to have you. And of course, our EXCO members who are here, you'll interact with them downstairs for the breakfast. And I really want to encourage you, go down. There are some very nice photographs there. You want to make sure you take a photo and share. You know, you'll thank me later for going down there this morning. Otherwise, with that, I want to say thank you to everybody, and TechCabal, as always. You're fantastic. We appreciate you. Thank you so much. I'm done.
Thanks a lot. So can I just ask my speakers to stay? We're going to take a photo with the MD. And yes, a special thank you to Ms. Yemi and to Lexi and to Tosin for speaking about the importance of gender inclusivity. I tweeted about it last week and they almost killed me. So it's good to hear actual people in the industry who know what they're talking about say it. Okay, so we can go downstairs and then we'll take a photo. So all the speakers can come to the front. Please enjoy the meal downstairs. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming. Thank you.